Lately, I've fallen in love with a literary genre that I've never knew the name of. After reading Kugel Saga, I just started looking around to figure out what kind of novel it is. It's obviously fantasy, but it just felt different, and I really enjoyed it. Well, I did some digging, and I found out it is what is known as a picaresque novel, and I wanted to know more about that style of novel. So I did a little more digging, and that led me to find out that my favorite book of all time is a picaresque novel, and that is A Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. Once I figured that out, it just sent me down a rabbit hole where I was like, I must know more about this subgenre. So let's talk about it. Before we get started, I just want to say that I know a lot of books will fit a lot of the qualifiers for what a picaresque novel is, and that's fine. You can define it pretty loosely, and a lot of stuff fits into it. It isn't like romance or hard-boiled detective novels where there's like understood things that go into it. Like there are qualifications, but there are rules that are a lot more easily broken in the picaresque novel than there are in other genres. At this point in my rambling, you're probably wondering, what is a picaresque novel? Well, let me explain it to you. To paraphrase the Merriam-Webster website, picaresque derives from Spanish picaresco, which means of or relating to a picaro. The picaro being the rogue usually at the center of picaresque fiction. The typical picaro is a wandering individual of low social standing who uses his wits to get by amongst the upper classes. The first known novel in this style is Lazarillo de Tormes, circa 1554, which is just another crazy thing to think about. This subgenre is 500 years old. Pretty awesome. Let's see what the major elements are that define the picaresque novel. The narrative is usually written in a first-hand account. The main character is usually of low social status and relies on their wits to hustle people from the higher classes. The other thing is generally the society or the government is corrupt. There is little or no plot. The stories are generally episodic in nature. There's also not a lot of character development. It's one of those once a scoundrel, always a scoundrel things. The Picaro story is also usually told with a plainness of language or more realistic writing. Satire is also a pretty prominent element in the better picaresque novels. Last but not least, the behavior of a picaresque protagonist is just short of being an outright criminal. Like, yeah, they're going to con you or they're going to steal something from you, but they're not killing anyone. Let's break these down some more so I can just talk about my thoughts on the genre and books that fit these definitions. I'm going to use two books as examples for this. The main reason I'm using those two is because they're the two I read most recently, and they're fantastic, and I highly recommend them. So let's get into it. I think that the first-hand account requirement is a little dated at this point. Some of the best picaresque stories I've read are third person. I think one of the huge benefits for that is you get to see the scumminess from someone else's perspective, like getting to see the guy act like a con artist and a turd instead of being in his mind and him just being like, I'm perfectly fine. I'm not doing anything wrong. So it's cool to see from both sides. The social status matters, but for narrative reasons, it can be changed. I enjoy the episodic nature of the genre, but I don't think that limiting it to a meandering story with no plot is required. I think you can tell an episodic story with a strong ending. In Kugel Saga, that's exactly what happens. Like there is a definite start and he has a goal he is trying to achieve and he gets to that goal by the end of the story. Now he happens to go through a lot of episodic nonsense to get there, but I mean that's the best part of the book, the journey. Like the destination's good, but I mean we're here for the journey. So I don't think you can completely rule out books that have a strong plot, but also the best ones really don't follow a plot. A good example, A Confederacy of Dunces doesn't really have a plot. I mean, you're just following Ignatius and his nonsense along with a couple of other people, and the book is amazing. There's no tying of loose ends required to have made that story enjoyable. There are events that happen throughout the book that do get tied up in the end, but there's a lot of stuff that doesn't, and that's fine because it's a picaresque, so episodic in nature, man. Just got to deal with it. A lack of character development isn't a must, but it seems like almost all of them follow that. It's one of those things, it's like once a hustler, always a hustler. I think it helps keep the reader engaged. This character is going to pull off some scheme and get rich. And then you're going to be like, oh, well, what happens now? They're obviously going to screw it up. I want to see how they're going to screw it up. And they do. And it's awesome. But throughout the story, you do spend a lot of time like, oh, is he learning a lesson right now that will change him for the better? And then, no. I think that's one thing that might be really frustrating for a lot of people reading Picaresque style novels is they're expecting a character to grow and change, but these people are either turds or morons, so I don't know what you were expecting out of them. When was the last time a turd or a moron in your personal life changed for the better? I think the real strength of the genre is the realism or the simplistic writing, and I don't mean simplistic as in stupid. They aren't dumbed down, but they are definitely a lot more readable. In Kugel Saga, he does a great play on this by using very simple, beautiful prose for all the exposition, but then the dialogue is like over the top and bombastic. All these people are using very proper language and big words, and it's such a cool contrast to the simple picaresque style of writing that you get in the rest of the work. Then you have a Confederacy of Dunces, which is simple, but the way Toole writes is just a joy. I mean, he throws the images of New Orleans into your mind and you just burn through the reading, and it's such a joy. I really think that the overall simplicity of the writing in the picaresque just makes them a lot more fun to read. Satire is a very important element as well. I think this style of novel is great for social commentary and exploration of themes that work better when they're floating just below the surface. I don't know about you, but it's a bit of a turnoff when the author comes at you with the social commentary or theme hammer and just hits you in the face. It's like, all right, author, trying to push something on me. Let's be a little more subtle, okay? And that's the nice thing about the picaresque is it's really easy to just slip these things in. We're having a good time, and then you're reading this thing like in Kugel Saga where he's basically forced into working for someone and he owes crazy debts to the fantasy equivalent of the company store, and you're like, oh, this is like real life, and yeah, this kind of sucks. I can't believe that they did something this unethical to these poor workers they were exploiting, and that kind of thing. Same with a Confederacy of Dunces when it comes to racial issues and social issues. You're just like, you're laughing, you're having a good time. And then afterwards, you kind of pause and think about it. And you're like, oh, wow. And so I think that's one of the great things about this style of novel, which probably applies to every style of novel. The last rule is a pretty hard and fast rule. Yeah, the main characters of these stories tend to be criminals, but they're not murderers and they're not like psychopaths, and they never really hurt people to get their way. Once they start doing that, the whole frame of the story just falls apart. Like, it's no longer fun. You definitely can't mess with turning your Picaro into some sort of psychopath. All of the charm would just evaporate. I want to give a few reading recommendations and a few picaresque novels that I plan on reading eventually. The most important books are, of course, A Confederacy of Dunces, which is a perfect picaresque novel. I mean, like almost to the T, other than being third person limited. And it is also the great American novel. I've already made a video about it. You can go check that out. And yeah, that one just needs to be read by pretty much everyone. I love it. And the other, for all of my more fantasy skewed audience, are Eyes of the Overworld and Kugel Saga by Jack Vance. Those are just beautifully written fantasy picaresques. Vance is just incredible. And I recently discovered a picaresque historical pulp written by Michael Chabon, of all people. This Pulitzer Prize winner was like, I'm gonna write a book that I sum up as Jews with Swords. He wrote a perfect homage to the picaresque and the pulp genres and just put them together and used his masterful literary skills to just give both genres like a glow up. It is so good. For my last recommendation, I want to recommend Candide. And the reason why is because the book is short and it's worth reading. And when you're done, you can be a pompous ass and tell people you read Voltaire for fun. And isn't that why we're all reading? So we can just lord it over others? When it comes to stuff I want to read, I definitely want to read Lazarillo de Tormes. It is on my TBR. Hopefully I can get to it in the near future. I want to listen to it. From the little bits I've read of it, it just feels like it would be better narrated to me by someone who really knows what they're doing. It's also short, so I'm definitely going to give it a chance. Along with that, I want to check out A Rogue's Life by Wilkie Collins. It was published in like the 1850s, and I've wanted to try Wilkie Collins, so I thought, what better way than with a Picaresque? While I was doing research for this, I found White Tiger by Aravind Adiga, and that won the Booker Prize. I think that'll be my first Booker Prize winning novel that I read, so I'm looking forward to that too. To sum this up, I think the Picaresque is a great structure for storytelling and something all readers should be aware of so they can better seek them out or avoid them. Understanding the elements of the genre has really helped me find more books to enjoy, and I hope it does the same for all of you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.